Hello everybody, my name is NapConnector here. What we have here is Kerbal Space Program. I'm going to show you how to get a quick head start in easy mode. The only exception here in easy mode is that I have COM network enabled. Everything else is the same. So I will click accept and it'll be a career mode. So the first thing you should probably know that whenever you start a new game in Kerbal Space Program is that you go to the VAB and then okay, got it. You go to the VAB and then you build your very first rocket. I'm going to show you guys how it is done. So pretty much whenever building your first rocket, this is pretty much the first thing you should do is you should select the command pod, build some basic fins like here, and then also you can very importantly, you should have mystery goo containment unit. I'm going to place 2 of those for the sake of balance. And now we have our very first rocket, or one of our very first rockets, because over here there are no fuel tanks and there's no command control. The only structural part is the modular coordinator segment, and there are no coupling agents. So let's begin by launching our very first rocket. And Jebediah Kerman should be automatically seated in our command pod. So now we have started, and now let's observe our mystery goo while we're in flight. Or actually, also something that I messed up right now is that I used a parachute, but that's okay because we're not going to travel very far, and it's also it's rather a small spacecraft that we're in right now. But as you can see, we can get a lot of science by doing mystery goo experiments. So once we get to the ground, we'll do another mystery goo report to do some more science. As you can see, I just did a crew report right here. Crew report while flying over Kerbal shores. The shores look inviting as you watch the waves roll to the coast. So once here's a trick. You can do time warp to 4x time, which is dynamic warp time, not like 5x, but you can do up to 4x without any mods or anything. So once you have reached the ground, then you may recover, or rather not recover yet, but do another mystery goo report, and then keep that experiment, and then recover the vessel. Before recovering, actually, once you reach the ground, you can do an EVA report and draw a surface sample. Or actually, the surface sample comes after it. Anyway, let's recover Jebediah Kerman, and then let's recover our spacecraft. As you can see here, we have gotten 4.8 science from an EVA report at the launch pad. Jebediah Kerman is ready for the next assignment, 1 experience gained. And then after that, we can recover our spacecraft from here. As you can see, we got 7.7 science from our crew report, 14 science from one of our mystery goo observations, 6 science from the mystery goo mystery goo observation, and then the recovery of the vessel that survived the flight result in 10 science. Also, something I forgot to do was to accept these contracts right here. We can test all these different parts, we cannot accept this contract yet because we have maxed out our contracts. So let's go leave the facility and go to the research and development. So right here in the research and development, we would want to research basic rocketry and engineering, and then engineering 101, which includes the thermometer, the coupler, and the communitron. The communitron is for sending data remotely if you're going. This is very useful if you're going on unmanned missions, but if you're bound to return, then I don't see much use with the communitron, since you have full control of the vehicle if you have one crew member inside. The next thing you would want to do is to get the survivability, because you can get more science from the press mat barometer, which measures pressure, and you get science from that. So let's escape the atmosphere by doing a new craft. And also, let's not forget the heat shield on our command pod before we have the decoupler. So that part the heat shield is pretty important on re-entry, especially if you are re-entering at a large angle. So it's important to have this heat shield right here. And this hammer solid fuel booster is pretty powerful. We could use that as a base thruster for now. I'm not going to use the liquid fuel engines yet, because these fuel tanks are quite expensive compared to the later more technologically advanced ones. Let's attach some basic fins and attach this is our MAK-1 parachute. And in addition to that, let's have the 2 mystery goo, and then we're going to include 2 press mat barometers and 1 too hot thermometer. And these thermometers can also collect more science on the way to escaping the atmosphere. And a quick trick, if you're going to have multiple crew, if the command pod is not the root part, then the command pod or crew carrying module will not be auto-filled with the crew. So what you will want to do is have that as your base part. Select the command pod first. You might want to move it up just for some more room to build if you're building large rockets. And also something that's pretty useful is the service bay, which is 1.25 meters, which is the same size as the hammer and the command pod. What we can use this for is storing our science experiments. I almost forgot about this one earlier. So let's make these angled this way, so that way we can access this a little more easily. So 2 hot thermometers. We can actually have 4 of them if you want, if you're really into digging up all that science. And then we have the decoupler. This time we can use two solid fuel boosters to help us get into space this time. So that way we have more burn, we can reach greater heights and collect more science. Okay, so let's make sure that let's review our checklist right here, which is another nifty feature. Engineer's report. It shows the different masses, the size, width, length, height. And what's important here is the design checklist. Electric charge required but not generated. That requires later tech parts. cannot transmit signs, an unused monopropellant source. So this is something that I recommend, especially for saving cash, as if you land further away from the launch pad, then you won't get a full refund anymore for the parts. So I advised, and since monopropellant cannot be used early in the game, I advise taking out the monopropellant by dragging this slider. And so also something to note is to be careful of the stages, of what order the stages are going to be going into, because if you have the parachute if the parachute happens to be on the bottom stage, this would not be good because these two would be deployed at the same time. Okay, but anyway, without further ado, let's launch our second craft. Let's name this if you want. You can name this if you want a memoir. And let's launch this thing. So let's open our service bay, and let's do a right click on the thermometer, keep the experiment and also the barometer. Let's not do our mystery goo because we already did experiments in flight with the mystery goo, but once we exit the atmosphere, then we'll do another mystery goo experiment. So we can now get higher into the sky with the hammer as opposed to the flea solid fuel booster. So we can finally complete our first contract, which is to achieve these goals, which is to achieve the goal to escape the atmosphere and to orbit Kerbal. Orbit Kerbal we will do a little bit later. But anyway, let's start conducting some more temperature surveys. Temperature scan from Kerbal's upper atmosphere. The temperature reads about -10, but in reality it's probably lower because that is as low as the thermometer can read. Let's do a barometer. The weather will remain pleasant, declares the barometer. And now, since we have escaped the atmosphere, let's do another temperature scan, and we have run out of barometers. So that's something that maybe I should have brought an antenna for, but that should be okay. Temperature scan, snacks fall of your mouth and garble your speech as you try to read off the temperature. KSC just regards it as bad radio transmission and waits for your next report. I'm not sure how the KSC can read at this height. That atmosphere. Glancing at the display, you shake your head and feel sorry for anyone who lives down there because of the higher pressure. Let's review our barometer. Atmospheric pressure scan while flying at Kerbal. Remember that barometers are often used to forecast weather. You examine the readings and decide that it might not be a good idea to be here in the next few hours. And over here, let's review the data. The thermometer is hanging on the capsule. Well, only one corner. You are afraid that you will touch it, it'll go flying off. We should have used the super glue instead of the OK glue. And then here, yep, temperature scan. Yep, the ambient temperature is the definition of quote-unquote beach weather. So that's some things that have come out of the scan. Let's observe our mystery goo. And here, the mystery goo isn't worth as much. The mystery goo observation in space, while in space near Kerbal, the goo seems to have clumped into a sphere. It also appears to have become brittle. That's something that you'll see almost anywhere around space. And last but not least, let's do a crew report. Crew report in space near Kerbal. It seems we are very much in space right now. The sky seems mostly below us. So that's something else that that's something else that if you ever heard of the expression "the sky isn't the limit," then you have probably heard you've probably heard that expression. I have, but I'm not sure if everybody has. And it looks like we are going to be landing in the mountains. So if that, in the case of that happening, we should increase the altitude. We should increase the altitude that this parachute will be deployed, or rather fully deployed, because otherwise the parachute will not deploy and you will crash land into the mountains. Let's save this. And we might also want to decrease the minimum pressure a little bit. And then also something important is not to deploy the parachute while during re-entry, because otherwise the parachute will get destroyed. And over here I don't think you need SAS on anymore, since the burn will make you point retrograde. So let's wait for our re-entry burn to stop. Okay. Okay, once this thing no longer is yellow or red, then you deploy. And then also, I recommend, if it's not if you have that fear of the parachute never opening up fully, then you can increase the altitude slider here. But you can also do the time warp. You can also use the time warp trick to get around a little bit faster. But this is something that about the mountain, is that the mountain is pretty high altitude. So if your parachute cannot deploy, if you forget to mess around with the altitude slider, and your parachute does not, then your parachute may not deploy fully, and you may end up crashing into Kerbin, which is not the best, certainly not the best of outcomes. But it seems that we're going to be landing on a mountain slope. So let's angle our spacecraft a bit. And part of it has exploded. Let's keep an eye on our. Okay, also, you might want to, if you're rolling like this, then you want to try to roll the other way by hitting Q or E, and then trying to recover the vessel. And doing an EVA here is practically impossible, because because you are on a mountain and the spacecraft can roll out and may get destroyed. So here we have successfully recovered. We got 189 science, and our first contract has been complete. Over here, it seems that there's more there's some testing. Decoupler test this decoupler landed at Kerbin, which means that let's see. So it means that it must be Kerbin and you must be landed. Let's accept this contract and do a quick test of the decoupler. And now that Jebediah Kerbin is now inside the command pod. Alright, so let's see. So we are at Kerbin and have landed. So let's test this by decoupling it. And it didn't work. I think I know what's wrong. Let's see, note. Actually, let's see the note first. Note: before instance, activate the part for the staging when all test conditions are met. So let's try rolling a bit. Let's try rolling a bit to see if we can get the contract complete. Another thing we could try doing is doing this, and that way we can roll. We can roll. And then we can roll this way. Also, this thing is an Easter egg. As an Easter egg, it only appears in career mode, or it only appears in career mode, not sandbox or science mode, because this is only for the lower level launch pad. As you can see here, it's not as much, not as big as the launch pad that I see in my other videos. But also, something that we could do is we can take a crew report while we are rolling this way. And once we've rolled into the grass, let's test out this decoupler. And it has exploded, so let's retry. Sometimes the part may explode if you're rolling, so it may be a little difficult to get there if it explodes all the time. But sometimes part exploding does happen on planes, especially with your taking off or landing, where a wheel may explode, and that's not the best of outcomes, especially for planes. But sometimes, I think it could be a bug with plane wheels. But I don't do a lot of space plane flying, so I don't think it's that big of a problem, especially if you're early in this stage, because once you learn aviation, the fixed wheels that you will get will not really be, they are not the best wheels, because they are a bit unstable and rather rigid, and it's difficult to land with them. So if you plan on flying plane with the aviation parts from which you can get from the R&D, then it will be quite the challenge. So let's test this decoupler again, and must be through all this staging sequence. And we have just completed the contract, and we can also do a quick EVA report to see if we can get any more science. EVA report, it is the same. So let's recover the vessel and research some more stuff, because we earned a lot of science from that high altitude space flight. Let's research general rocketry, and we get the Reliant booster, which is more powerful, and it's useful for greater thrust. The Thumper engine, this one's really useful in early stages, as solid fuel boosters are generally cheaper than liquid fuel boosters. You can also research stability, and this is the aviation parts. The aviation parts I don't recommend researching unless you get a lot of science, because the basic aviation parts are generally unstable, especially these wheels, because they're hard to control. But they're hard to control, and it's very hard to land, because these guys don't have suspension. But so we should probably be researching the other ones. If you don't know exactly in the day when you're going to launch, like if you launch at night, but you want to start escaping in the day, then you can time warp until the day, and with this launch stability enhancer, that can help, because it generates electricity. And something else is the storage. as you saw in the checklist before, the electricity storage was lacking in our command pod. So this is where the rechargeable battery bank pack comes in, and it's the cheapest, and it's the cheapest electric storage unit, cheapest version of electric storage per unit. I don't think you can get any cheaper than the per unit of electricity than the rechargeable battery pack. But let's research this, and and we get also a science junior, so we can get more science out of this. Let's research flight control, because these winglets are pretty good winglets. And if you are into lighter engines, you might also research advanced rocketry, because the Terrier is very good for MUN missions. But you get the good landing gear at landing at this stage, because that is around the time where usually you can land on the MUN. So something more that we can do is achieve orbit, and this has an exceptional prestige, which is 3 stars. So let's see some more part testing. Test it over flight. I do not recommend doing these tests, because you have to be flying at a specific speed and altitude, and then these are rather hard to sometimes these are rather hard to achieve. So but doing stuff like test the swivel engine, liquid fuel engine, splashdown at Kerbal, you do that and you can get some more prestige. So something to do is that when you accept these exploration contracts, which have this logo for those who don't have mods, you cannot remember that once you accept them, you cannot cancel, and you cannot get any more contracts from the exploration part until you have completed all other contracts. So let's attempt to get into orbit. Right here, let's have our thermal shield. And our parachute. And then let's also use a liquid fuel engine, because liquid fuel engines, unlike solid fuel engines, liquid fuel engines can generate electricity. So that's something that I recommend, is using liquid fuel engines whenever you want to do generate electricity, especially in orbital flights. But at the beginning stage, usually a solid fuel booster will do, like here. And also you can use some rechargeable battery packs if you're ever worried about electricity going down. So now you store 250 units of electricity. And then also something new is the drogue chute. Drogue chutes are usually, I don't use drogue chutes that often, but they are smaller than the other type of radial parachute. Drogue chutes I don't use that often, especially since these ones usually serve me well anyway. So let's launch in a little bit once we have everything in our checklist accounted for. Cannot transmit unused monopropellant. So let's equip ourselves with a barometer, so that way, because we have yet to collect the data. Let's name this first orbiter, And let's make sure Jebediah is there, and he is. So let's launch. And here we have, and now we are launching our first orbiter with the solid fuel engine. So once this engine runs out, then we decouple, and then release this part of the rocket to orbit Kerbin. And in order to orbit Kerbin, we must achieve a periapsis of at least 70 kilometers above sea level, which is where the atmosphere begins. So let's collect as much science as we can. So once we achieve an apoapsis of around 72,000 meters, then we will begin a prograde burn, which should help us get us around the planet. And also let's take some crew reports to see if, yep, okay, we have good amount of science collected from that crew report. So once we hit this apoapsis, then we do a prograde burn. Make sure this thing is aligned with this prograde marker on the nav ball. You're almost at 7,020 kilometers. We can also start a prograde burn around here if you're a bit too lazy, or rather you're too afraid that you might drop too much altitude if you do not start the burn. And looks like we don't have enough fuel to do a full orbit, so let's go back to the vehicle assembly. And this feature is useful in easy or normal mode when you are not sure, when you have doubts if your system will work or not. So let's equip ourselves with more fuel, so that way we can get into orbit. And let's start our engines. Also, something that I recommend doing is pressing D a little bit after the launch, so the angle of the spacecraft is a bit is leaning this way, so that way you can get into orbit a little easier, especially since that way is the orbit, which is towards the sea rather towards the mountains over here. So that way you can get into orbit a little easier with less with more meters per second with the opportunity of using less meters per second of rocket fuel. And let's start. We have started our Terrier liquid fuel engine, and Terrier liquid fuel engines aren't as effective as the other liquid fuel engines or the solid fuel booster at lower altitudes. So if we get an apoapsis of around 7,200 kilometers, then 72 kilometers above sea level, then usually around there is when you should start the burn. But I think maybe we should use our swivel engine because they have greater power. And also importantly is that we don't use a Reliant liquid fuel engine because the Reliant one does not have a gimbal, unlike the Terrier or the Swivel. Though the Reliant may be more efficient at lower altitude. So we are reached 44 kilometers above sea level. Let's try crew report. The crew report is good. And then the barometer, can't do that yet. I'll have to wait till I get a little higher. 50,000. I think we have to do it around 55 or 60,000 meters above sea level. So our apoapsis is now 73 meters above sea level. So let's angle our spacecraft and burn this way. So that way we get more. That way we're more likely to achieve orbit. So we've gone through half of our rocket fuel. Let's try the pressure. Still no. But yeah, so achieving orbit is a little bit difficult in the earlier stages of the game. I think maybe we should reach the apoapsis a bit too, and then burn there. And also something about this is that a new song will play whenever you reach space, or if you use a cheat to teleport to another planet. Which is I don't know the titles of the music honestly, but it is almost but anyway, we almost have achieved an orbit. Okay, 44, 50, and 71. We have officially reached orbit around Kerbin. We have achieved the goal. So now let's time warp. Let's time warp through this area. And also keep in mind on our electric charge, it does not go down whenever it's crewed, which is a good thing. But let's do a slight retrograde burn, so that way we have that way we can re-enter the atmosphere and splash down or land with our parachute. And also keep in mind that parachutes not work everywhere in Kerbal Space Program. So if you're going to land like the Mun, for instance, because if you're going to land on the Mun, it will the Mun does not have an atmosphere, so parachutes will not work. But anyway, we are over the crater area, and somewhere over here there's a crater. There's a station called Crater Rim, and by the way, these stations, you can visit these stations in Kerbal Space Program. Might even make a video on it. But anyway, we have a beautiful view of the crater lake and the impact ejecta, or whatever that's called, on Eve. And let's conduct. I forgot almost doing a materials study in. Okay, we're in Kerbin's upper atmosphere, so let's conduct the report. And as we go down into the atmosphere, let's experience our burn. Let's close the doors just for aerodynamic protection. In atmosphere. Yeah, I think I should have done it in vacuum, because I'm not getting any report. But maybe you know what? Maybe I'll do it over the highlands or the desert, wherever I'm gonna land. Because you can get different reports from different biomes, like the desert, you can get, if you do a pressure report or a temperature report in the desert, it'll be something else. It'll be something other than the KSC or most other places. But we are on the desert west of the Kerbal Space Center. So let's land here, and also go EVA once we land. That way we can do an EVA report, and also log the um, also log the pressure data once we're landed there to see if there is any difference in pressure. And our materials bay exploded through the heat shield, which is kind of weird. I don't understand why. It's kind of weird how the heat shield didn't explode, but the thing through it exploded. It's probably something to do with Kerbal Space Program physics. But now we've done an atmospheric pressure scan. As you can see, it is different than it's different than most other it is different than the other biome scan. And so we done an EVA report. You pour juice on small cactus. You decide to call Mr. Prick in hopes it grows to be a beautiful palm tree. And also later in the game, you can take when you can take surface samples. You can also plant flags. I should probably do. It happens when you upgrade the facilities, which I will show that as the last part of this video. Let's see how much science we have obtained from this mission orbiting Kerbin. We have obtained 9 science, 4.8 science, 7.2 science, 20 science, which ultimately means 98 science. And we currently have 98.8 science. So let's research the 2 last. Actually, we could, if you ever want to do a MUN mission, I recommend researching landing. And here we go. So now you have the landing gear and this large parachute, except I have not researched the command pod. I have not researched the command module, so I cannot use this command one yet. And as you can see, there is something new that we have not seen in this facility before. Over here, onto the right of the 160, cannot research technologies over 100 science at this level, and there is a science limit over here, as you can see. Science limit is 100. We cannot research anything that costs 100 or more. We can increase this by upgrading the facility. And then once we upgrade, resource transfer is now available, but we require, but for EVA samples and planting flags, it requires that we upgrade this facility, which allows more active Kerbals. So now you can hire 8 more Kerbals, whereas only 1 before upgrading this facility. And I usually stick to upgrading the spaceplane hangars. I don't upgrade the spaceplane hangars usually until I'm able to do good spaceplanes. But this runway does kind of remind me of the airfield, the abandoned airfield over here. Something else I recommend is upgrading this once for to allow for more contracts. But and you can also do a flyby of the MUN. We're going to accept this contract for when we get to the MUN. We're also going to upgrade the upgrade the vehicle assembly building, abbreviated the VAB. And then we're also going to upgrade, we might also even upgrade the launch pad, which releases some restrictions on vessel size, maximum vessel size, and vessel weight. And then we can also upgrade the we can also um, we can also upgrade the tracking station so that way our orbit now appears in blue, whereas before it appeared in gray. But that is it for this video, guys. If you liked it, like the video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.